When you think about your brain, you're thinking with your brain, sending billions of neurotransmitter molecules across countless millions of synapses. Indeed, say neuroscientists, the mind is what the brain does. This gentleman's name is Phineas Gage. And the reason why we study Phineas Gage is because of an accident that he experienced while working on a construction crew. He was tapping down the explosives with a pole on this particular construction job when he was distracted and ignited the powder, and the pole shot through his head and came out his frontal lobe. Now, we don't study Phineas Gage necessarily because of his extraordinary survival from this event. We study it because of the personality changes that occurred after the accident. His personality changed drastically. His language changed. He started to use foul language. His disposition changed, and because of this, he lost his job. But Gage's case has had quite an influence on psychology. The changes founded in his personality sheds light on the specialization of brain function. Today's scientists better understand the role that the frontal cortex has to play in important higher-order functions like reason, language, and social cognition. Gage's story served as one of the first sources of evidence that the frontal lobe was involved in personality. So during the course of this short lesson, you'll be learning what are the functions of the brainstem and its related structures? What are the structures and functions of the limbic system? And what are the four lobes of the cerebral cortex, and where are they located? So learning about the brain is kind of like studying geography while the early explorers were mapping the world. It's just a huge, sometimes overwhelming project. We're going to take it a little simple, but let's begin our exploration of the brain right now. The brain's oldest and innermost region is the brainstem. It is responsible for automatic survival functions. So it begins where the spinal cord ends and swells slightly after entering the skull. This slight swelling is called the medulla. So the medulla, it controls your heartbeat and your breathing. And as some severely brain-damaged patients have illustrated, no brain or conscious mind is needed to keep your heart pumping and our lungs breathing. The brainstem handles all of those tasks without us having to think about it. So just above the medulla sits the pons, the brainstem area that helps coordinate movements and is involved with facial expression. So within the pons is a crossover point. And here you'll find a sort of cross-wiring with most nerves to and from each side of the body, of the brain. And it connects the body's opposite sides. So the right brain controls the left side of the body, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. So along with the pons being responsible for helping coordinate movement and facial expressions, this goes along really well with the fact that at the pons is where we have that crossover. And also, that is one reason why it helps coordinate movement, because the right side of the brain is dealing with that right side of the body and the left, the right side. So it kind of creates a balance. Okay, so at the rear of the brainstem, we have the cerebellum, or it means the little brain. And the reason why they call it this is it's these two wrinkled halves, they resemble the big brain, the larger part of our brain. So this little baseball-sized structure plays an important role in what happens outside our awareness. It coordinates our voluntary movement and balance. It also helps us kind of judge time, discriminate sounds and textures, and controls our emotions. It also coordinates voluntary movement, like I've said. So for an example, when a soccer player masters controlling the ball, we need to give some credit to his cerebellum. If you're injured or your cerebellum is affected by drugs or alcohol, you could have trouble walking, keeping balance, or shaking hands. It also helps process and store memories for things that we can't consciously remember, such as how to ride a bike. You don't really have to remember it. You just can get right back on and do it again. That's the kind of memories that it helps us form. So we've explored the brain's oldest parts, but we've not yet reached its newest and highest regions. The cerebral hemisphere between the oldest and the newest brain areas lie the limbic system. So the limbic system contains the amygdala, hypothalamus, and hippocampus, and also the pituitary gland can be found in there as part of it is also there, but it's kind of in the endocrine system, but it kind of sneaks into this area. So, there we go. So the limbic system, the structures in it, it's associated mostly with emotions such as fear, aggression, and drives like food and sex. And it includes the hippocampus, the amygdala, and hypothalamus, like I said. All right, so let's first talk about the amygdala. So there are 2 lima bean-sized neural clusters which enable aggression and fear. So in 1939, researchers surgically removed the monkey's amygdala, turning this normally ill-tempered, cranky animal into a very mellow, sweet monkey. So if we directly stimulate the amygdala of a normally mellow, calm cat, the cat will prepare for attack and hissing with its back arched, its pupils wide, and its hair on edge. You move the electrode only slightly within the amygdala, and you cage the cat with a small mouse, and now it'll cower in fear towards the edge of the cage. So next, the hypothalamus. So this is an important link in the change of command for bodily maintenance. It lies just below the thalamus. Some neural clusters in the hypothalamus influence hunger. Others influence thirst, body temperature, and sexual behavior. And also, so this one has several maintenance activities it's involved in, and it also helps govern the endocrine system through the pituitary gland. It is the one that controls our hormones. So there was an experiment done by James Olds and Peter Milner. They made the discovery about the hypothalamus. So they made a mistake when they were trying to implant electrodes into a rat's reticular formation. In one rat that they placed the electrode in, it wasn't done incorrectly. And that rat kept returning to the location where it had been stimulated by this misplaced electrode, as if seeking more stimulation. So when Olds and Milner discovered that they had actually placed a device in a region of the hypothalamus, they actually realized that they had stumbled upon the brain center that provides pleasurable rewards. In later studies, when rats were allowed to control their own stimulation in these and other areas, they did so at such a feverish pace, pressing the pedal up to 7,000 times an hour until they dropped from exhaustion. To get this stimulation, they would even be willing to cross an electrified floor that a starving rat wouldn't cross over to reach food. So we have the hippocampus. Okay, so this processes conscious memories. Animals or humans who lose their hippocampus to surgery or injury will also lose their ability to form new memories of facts and events. And of course, we have already talked about the pituitary gland in an earlier lesson with the endocrine system, because it is actually part of the endocrine system. It excretes hormones, but it is in this region of the limbic system. And remember, it is a master gland, and it secretes growth hormones. However, the hypothalamus regulates the pituitary gland. All right, so the older brain networks sustain basic life functions and enable memory, emotion, and basic drives. But the height above these older structures are the 2 large cerebral hemispheres, which contribute to about 85% of the brain's weight. Covering those hemispheres, like bark on a tree, we have the cerebral cortex. A thin layer of interconnected neurons. It enables thinking, sensing, and speaking. It's your brain's thinking crown, your body's ultimate control and information processing center. It kind of looks like an oversized walnut, and it's about the size of if you were to spread it out. If it were flattened out, it would be the size of a large pizza. So each hemisphere cortex is divided into 4 lobes, and we'll talk about each of these lobes. So you have, first, we have the frontal lobes. They lie directly behind your forehead, and they're primarily responsible for speaking and muscle movements and making plans and judgment. So speaking, muscle movement, plans, and judgment. The parietal lobes are the portion of the cerebral cortex. They lie on the top of the head and toward the rear. They receive sensory input for touch and body position, so pressure and pain. And we also have the occipital lobes. This is pretty easy to remember because they are in charge of visual fields. They lie at the back of the head, and they include the areas that receive information from the visual fields. I have a family member who in class once, his friends were playing a trick on him, and he was sitting down in his chair. They pulled the chair behind him away from him, and so he landed, he fell, and his back of his head, where his occipital lobes are, crashed on the back of a desk, and it actually affected his vision. It damaged part of his occipital lobe. We also have the temporal lobes. So they are the portion of the cerebral cortex that lie above the ears. They receive information from the ears. They're primarily responsible for hearing and understanding language. Okay, so let's go over these a little bit again. We have the frontal lobe that is directly behind your forehead, and of course it's involved in speaking, muscle movements, making plans, and judgment. The occipital lobes are at the back of the head, and they are involved in receiving information from your visual fields. We have the parietal lobes that are the top of the cerebral cortex, the top of the head towards the rear, and they are responsible for things like pressure, pain, sensory input for touch and body position, things like that. And then last of all, we have the temporal lobes. So perfect location because they are in charge of our hearing and language. They're right by the ears. Our temples, that's why they're called our temples.